Hey everyone! For this next video, I thought I'd take a step back once again to talk about a title that didn't get as much recognition in the States here due to the fact that it never got an official release before. Until now. Yes, with the recent release of the Castlevania Anniversary Collection for PC and modern consoles, US gamers finally got a chance to see just what they'd been missing out on back in 1990. Was it worth the wait? And why did it take so long for us to get it in the first place? Let's strap in and find out how Kid Dracula holds up today. Kid Dracula, or Akumajo Special Boku Dracula-kun, as it's called in Japan, is a Castlevania spin-off parody, starring the son of the infamous Demon King himself, Alucard, or at least a parody of him. After waking up from a 10,000-year-long nap, Kid Dracula decides to watch TV, wouldn't we all, when he's suddenly bitten by one of his servant bats. When asked to explain itself, the bat simply responds, "Hurrah for Garamoth," before fainting. After this, Garamoth himself appears on Kid Dracula's TV screen and explains that he took over the entire demon realm while Kid Dracula was sleeping. Kid Dracula decides he won't have any of it, smashes his TV in anger, and sets out to find and defeat Garamoth and reclaim his title as Demon King. Okay, so the story is silly and straightforward enough, but how about the gameplay? Well, it turns out that's pretty nice too. You start out the game with a homing shot attack that you can also charge, as well as fire left, right, and even up when necessary. After each stage, you gain a new type of weapon or ability that you can easily switch between with the press of a button. So, like Mega Man, basically. On top of being an action game, Kid Dracula is also a platformer at heart, as are all the great Castlevania games. Unlike certain other platformers of the same era, your controls are very tight and precise, leading to less frustrating and pointless deaths through slipping. It will feel like a more clunky Mega Man game to some, but I think this actually suits the more kid-friendly approach quite well. It also makes the whole game feel much more forgiving than other titles from the era. At least at first. The game consists of a total of 9 stages, each littered with enemies, platforming challenges, and boss battles at the end. There are little nods to other Castlevania games scattered all over the place, including the more kid-friendly versions of classic enemies, and even some of the same settings. I thought that place looked familiar. The levels also have a great deal of variety to them, so you don't feel like you're replaying the same stage over and over. Stage 3, for example, puts you in an underwater setting where you walk slower but your jumps are much higher. There's also Stage 4, where the floors are icy and slippery, making your jumps extra hard to land. The bosses are also pretty creative and hilarious. One of them, for example, is supposed to represent the spirit of a chicken that Dracula ate. Another stage has you traversing through New York City with Spider-Man and Jason Voorhees clones running about, only to find Lady Liberty herself at the end. Instead of fighting her, she puts you on a quiz show alongside the bosses from the first 2 stages. If you couldn't already tell, this is not your typical romp with the Belmonts. Between each stage, you also get the chance to play a different minigame and try your luck at winning extra lives. These games range from roulette all the way to trying not to stab a skeleton in a barrel. All of the games are luck-based and don't require any kind of skill to win. You just pick a choice and hope for the best. Although most of the powers you gain throughout the game are new weapons, there are some exceptions, like the Bat ability, which allows you to fly over obstacles and reach platforms you previously could not. Or the Upside Down power, which flips Kid Dracula onto the ceiling in order for him to pass through more environments and even give you an edge against some of the game's bosses. The difficulty also needs to be discussed. Things start off very easy, and the new weapons and abilities you start to gain only make things that much simpler. And then Stage 7 comes along. Almost out of nowhere, the game suddenly ramps up the difficulty to exceedingly high degrees. In this stage, you're forced to jump up moving platforms while sliding through a giant tube. Some platforms stay in place, while others move up and down, making the whole thing really disorientating. It doesn't help when enemies start appearing on some of them too. This section took me more than a few tries, and I feel genuinely sorry for any little kids that had to go through something so drastically hard out of nowhere like that. Thankfully, the rest of the game is at least slightly less unforgiving. The final stage involves getting through 3 different boss fights and will be a real test of one's patience, figuring out just what you need to do to beat each type of enemy. They were tough fights, but not impossible. I felt pretty satisfied by the time the credits began to roll. On top of paying tribute to the other NES and Famicom era Castlevania titles, a bit of the reverse would come to happen as well. Rahab, for example, would go on to be a boss fight in Castlevania Dawn of Sorrow, and even the game's final boss, Garamoth, or Galamoth, depending on your preference, went on to become an optional boss fight in Castlevania Symphony of the Night, as well as an ability soul in Castlevania Aria of Sorrow, and a point of reference in Castlevania Judgment. The game also looks incredible for its time, with all kinds of vibrant colors and details that take full advantage of the Famicom's graphical capability. You'll hardly forget any of the scenery or wacky enemies you come across throughout your journey. So now we'll talk about just why it took so long for this game to come out in the US. If you've ever played the original cartridge and gotten through the first boss fight, you can probably already guess. At the end of Stage 1, you fight both a child and parent ghost. In the original version of the game, the parent ghost had a Buddhist manji symbol on its forehead, which in Japan was typically used to represent a spiritual symbol. This was obviously viewed quite differently here in the US as well as other countries due to being the same shape as the swastika. It also didn't help that the enemy in question was wearing white robes. Yikes. For this new release in the Anniversary Collection, the symbol was unsurprisingly removed. I could understand some people being a little annoyed about this due to the symbol's actual meaning here, but at the same time it's hard to blame them considering how controversial it obviously looks out of context. This symbol was also removed in the Game Boy Color version of the title, just for reference. So was it worth bringing this title back from the dead? I say yes, absolutely. Even if you were to remove all the jabs and references to the original Castlevania titles, this is still a fun little platformer that went under many people's radars, and I'm thrilled to see more gamers finally get the chance to see exactly what makes it such a special and unique part of the Castlevania franchise. And that's gonna do it for this video. Have you ever played the game before yourself? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and thanks again for watching. I'll see you all again soon.